Welcome everybody to the Building a Gold Medal Team, Rewarding and Retaining Top Warehouse Talent. Information discussed in this session represents the views of individuals and does not constitute legal advice. You should consult your organization's leadership and legal counsel. Thank you. My name is Dave Christine. I will be your moderator today for this terrific presentation. We will have, can you go to the next slide? Mm-hmm. Our presenters, our moderators and presenters will be Brenda Stoltz and Olga Foyt. Olga Foyt is based out of San Antonio, Texas. She has over 11 years of experience in the field of HR, primarily in supply chain areas. She is passionate about aligning HR strategies to the objectives of the organization to help leaders build teams that drive optimal business results. On her free time, Olga enjoys spending time going to the beach and playing with her kids and husband. Brenda Stoltz is a human resources leader and experienced operations manager with over 10 years of supply chain experience. She holds experience in leading highly proficient teams comprising of HR specialists, HR business partners, and operations managers. Brenda aims to develop a healthy workspace environment that nurtures new talent and helps operational partners meet their goals. She is based out of Indianapolis, where she spends most of her time ensuring her 3 toddler boys don't get into too much trouble. So today, for our team rewarding and retaining top warehouse talent, our topics will be to identify the top talent, rewarding and retaining warehouse employees, and building a gold medal team.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate the warm welcome there. So Olga and I are very excited to talk to everyone today, particularly about this topic, right? I mean, I think labor has always been a top topic, but we would be remiss if we didn't say that over the last 2 years, it has not become even much more critical, and then particularly within supply chain companies, right? So we're excited to talk to you guys a little bit about just our previous experiences, as well as the experiences that we're gaining through working with a lot of different clients in Alpine, so that hopefully you can take away some really good information and start to apply it to build a really good team this year that'll take you through the next peak season. So it'll be here before we know it. But before we jump into that, we really want to just kick things off a little bit by asking everyone to take a quick poll. So Dave, if you could put that on the screen, we are just really curious to hear from you guys, right? I think within supply chain, one of the things that we started to notice is really that collaboration is key in companies that are successful or not, right? And being really open-minded about what other companies are doing and are not doing, and applying those lessons to your organization really makes the difference. So we'd like to take this opportunity to just ask all of our attendees a quick question about which of the retention tactics they have found to be the most effective when it comes to retaining talent. Awesome. Is that up on the screen, Dave?
It is.
Oh, awesome.
Let's give everybody a minute.
We'll give everyone a minute to do it. All right, we'll come back to the results. For now, we'll just let everyone kind of answer, and I'm really excited and curious to see what everyone will say. So jumping into things, oops, sorry, I lost my slide here. Give me 1 second. Jumping into things here, I'm going to hand it off to Olga. That's just going to talk to us a little bit about identifying top talent. Well, first, before I hand it off to her, it really starts with building a great team is one, you got to have the right people on board, right? And so in order to really identify who are the people that you want to be part of that great team, you need to have processes in place to be able to identify and differentiate between your top, your middle, and then, essentially your bottom performers, right? So if you don't have this set today, we really encourage you guys to establish and follow some performance management routines, really to evaluate everyone against the same metrics and expectations, right? So when you think about a top performer, I think within supply chain, and when you think about a warehouse and the four walls, it's very easy to just think, oh, the person that's the most productive, right? The person that's maybe moving the most units throughout the warehouse. But we all know that that's not necessarily the case, right? We need to look at everyone's performance in a very well-rounded way and ensure that you're really taking your company's core values into consideration, right? When you think about a top employee, not only how are they being productive, right? Are they doing quality work, but also are they exhibiting the values that you want them to exhibit, right? When you identify that top talent within your warehouse, it kind of radiates throughout the rest of the employees. And so they now become an example for everyone else to follow. And so it becomes an example for everyone to kind of measure themselves against, which is why it's very important that as you think about who are my top performers, you think about it in a very well-rounded way, right? The other thing, when you are taking these performance management conversations, when you're making these assessments of your employees, make sure that you make it as objective as possible, right? So for example, productivity is one way that you can make this very objective. And depending on the size of the company, though, this is either really easy for you because maybe you have a top tier LMS, labor management system, that gives you productivity measures at the end of the day or the week. And it really tells you, hey, this employee, based on the work that they're doing and the engineering standard that we have set, is performing at a 98%, right? And so that makes it very easy for you to compare employee performance across the organization. However, we also work with companies that don't have that, right? So maybe they're a smaller size company, maybe they don't have an LMS system in place and they're still doing everything very manual. If that's the case for your organization, it's still really important to make sure that you try to make it objective by coming up with some kind of standard, right? So an example with that would be, hey, let's take an average. Yes, it's not going to be perfect, and we know that not all freight is the same, but let's take an average and say that over the course of 8 hours, I want all of my receivers to, receive X number of units, right? This way, when you look at performance across employees, you're really truly comparing apples to apples. The other one is really look for trends to support your assessment, right? Assessing employee performance and your top talent is not a one-time event. It is not something that you do monthly or quarterly or during an annual review and then forget about it. Obviously, things change, expectations of the job change, demands change, and so does the performance of those employees, right? Whether it's because, there's something at home that's driving that performer, so there's disengagement potentially. That's your job as a leader to try to figure it out. But at the end of the day, really look for that trend, right? If this is a person that's been a top employee for you in the past, just because they have a bad day or a bad week doesn't mean that all of a sudden now they're a poor performer, right? Instead, it's kind of a challenge and for you to really talk to that employee and figure out how you help them become a great employee for you again, right?
Brenda, I like that you stated that it's not always just the top performer that's your leader or your top talent, but it's also adding in there to the actual leaders or the people you recognize as leaders within the groups as well.
Yes, exactly. I think, Dave, and you may not think of it, right? Because typically these conversations should, right? And they do happen behind closed doors. And so maybe you're sitting down and you have a roster of 25 employees and you and your manager, it's typically the managers and the senior ops managers are discussing, who's your top talent, who do we need to potentially develop, et cetera. And you think that just stays behind closed doors, right? But absolutely not. When you in your mind think that someone is a top talent, you are obviously going to recognize that employee more, right? They're going to be that much more visible. You're going to delegate them and really lean on them a lot more. And so those subtle cues are really seen across the entire team, right? So you're absolutely right. You just need to be very aware of the influence that that has on everyone else. And then lastly, the other thing that we would also call out is just when you think about top talent in your organization, that calibration across the whole building is very important. Meaning, what someone in receiving considers top talent should really be very aligned with what someone in shipping considers to be top talent, right? Because when we think about really building a gold medal team, we're not talking about the 8 to overnight shifts. Like, we're really just talking about, in general, the whole entire organization and ensuring that everyone's meeting performance expectations and is really there to ensure that the whole entire team wins. Awesome. And then with that, let's talk. Once you develop that team, once you hire them and you identify those top performers, you really want to make sure that you have a plan to reward them and then eventually retain them as well, right? Olga, I'll hand it off to you.
All right, thank you, Brenda. And hi, everyone. Really happy to be here with you today. So I think, as we all know, today's labor shortages have really creating a talent war across supply chain. And we are seeing all organizations of different sizes really look to solve this talent gap to a certain degree. And they're looking to get really creative about ways in that, not just in which they can attract talent, but also retain it and grow it within the organization. So I think gone are the days where compensation alone would solve the problem. And companies felt like if they just increased salaries, that was going to be a quick fix. We are really seeing the importance in making sure companies are providing a well-rounded total rewards package. And that really takes into account the well-being of their team, but that it's also very tailored to the team. Whether it's related to location or demographics or circumstances, we're really seeing these very specific and tailored approaches. So I think our goal here over the next few minutes is going to be to really kind of discuss the importance of having a clear employee value proposition. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means, but then, how it really kind of serves as a foundation to building a really great total reward strategy. And then we'll give you specific examples related to, what things you can do around growth and development and also employee rewards. Like Brenda mentioned, our hope here is that you can leverage your knowledge of what companies are doing across the industry to really help develop your own. And, as a note, we're not at all suggesting that this list is one all-inclusive. There are tons of ideas out there and things that companies are trying. And things are constantly changing and evolving as it is. And we're also not, presenting that, suggesting that all the ideas we're presenting here today, organizations should do and would be just as effective. It really comes down to knowing your team and building a plan that's really tailored for you. Awesome. So employee value proposition.
I like the idea that you're looking at this from the standpoint of the individual, that not everybody is motivated by the same avenues.
Yeah.
So you're utilizing the tools, thinking through each resource and how we can keep them motivated and how we can keep them in the company versus just trying to look at it as a whole group. That's nice.
Yes, absolutely. I think, the short answer is there is no universal easy fix to the problem. And companies are going to have to get really creative and really dig deep to understand their teams and the cultures within their teams and what's important to them to help them solve that long term. Absolutely. Awesome. So employee value proposition. So what is an employee value proposition? Really, it refers to the collection of benefits you as an employer will use to market to either prospective employees or current employees. And so what it's really saying is, here is what differentiates us from our competitors. Here are the benefits that we offer and the perks that you will obtain that really invest in you in the long run, that make you want to work for us instead of someone else. This is particularly important across an industry where you could go into a warehouse and do a very similar job. So employees are making decisions on, well, if I'm moving a box, what's in it for me beyond that financial component? And so we'll talk a little bit, about that and how important it is. I would say, if you believe that you don't have yet a clear point of view around what that value proposition is, I think that's where, you should start talking and discussing with your leadership team. What is it that we want to be known for as an employer, and what benefits are the most meaningful to our employees? And so that's where you can leverage a lot of your knowledge of your team, the circumstances that they're in, to help you develop the idea around what values you want to bring. So, an example I would share about an organization that we've worked with is, given the COVID demands over the last couple of years, they were finding that they, like every other company, right, they had a ton of call-offs, people were coming in late, and they're really struggling to staff. So they took a step back and they started to analyze and really dig in, and it really was almost a very manual effort to understand what was driving it. What were some of the things that were happening that they could act on to help solve that issue? And so what they found was that lots of families with young children were really struggling with their childcare. And I know that this is probably sounds very familiar to a lot of you. And because COVID had disrupted previous childcare plans that they had, whether it be a relative or someone close that was able to take care of them, all of a sudden that was no longer a reliable childcare plan. And then what they also found, as you may know, childcare is incredibly expensive, and it's difficult for families, depending on their wages and personal situations at times, to make work, both parents make sense of working. And so it resulted in some of the parents deciding to leave. So ultimately what the organization decided to do was to really make a decision around investing and providing a subsidy for childcare. And so going forward, this is not just for COVID, not just to help get through those difficult times, but to really say, we want to support our employees beyond just the immediate person that's working for us. And we see them as a whole in terms of, here's their family, and here's what we can do to help ensure that we are providing them some flexibility and some more reliability when it comes to things that are a priority to them, which is their family. And so this is now something that the company is using to market and say, here is a benefit or a perk, because we understand one of the challenges and the sacrifices that have to be made. But as an organization, we're willing to support you in that, to make that happen. So just an example of some of the things that you can do and how you can start thinking about the best ways to help your employees. I will pause there, Brenda, just to see if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's a great example. And I think you're right. In today's climate, that tends to be a challenge, right? That one has could have a pretty big financial impact on the organization, right? And so not every organization may be able to do that. But another example of something very similar that we had company do is they looked at their schedules and they looked at how they aligned with schools in their area. And they realized that by shifting their schedules just up an hour, right, then they would be able to allow parents to actually drop off when they needed to drop off, or pick up when they needed to pick up, right? And really allow them to still take care of their child, drop them off at school, and then make it to work on time by shifting just their schedules an hour, either up or down. So I think that's another example of that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And just the two others that I would share that we're seeing companies really use to leverage that, hey, here's our overall employee value proposition, is college prep assistance. So for those parents that have, students that are getting ready to apply for colleges, they provide a discount for a college coach that can help them kind of navigate through that process. In addition to that, they also have started to look at, can we offer safe driving courses at a discount rate for teenage drivers? So again, I think the idea here is just, how do we start to think beyond just like the immediate benefit to the employee, but understanding what other benefits could be provided, to things that are important to the employees, like their family and kids, to help really establish yourself as a strong employer of choice in your area.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think that's really key there is your area. So what we also know is that it can be very market driven, right? So depending on what's going on in the market and the challenge that that market is facing, then companies are getting creative. So another example of that, in a large metropolitan area, the company realized that there wasn't a bus stop right in front of their distribution center. And so that's why a lot of people, when they went to apply and when they to ask, like, hey, why is it that you're leaving? They would say, well, I just don't have a reliable way to get here, right? I'm late because I have to walk a mile from the bus stop down to the distribution center. And so what that distribution center actually did is they worked with the city and they actually added a bus stop right in front of their distribution center, right? And so now what they did is they really made it really easy for that population to now have reliable transportation to and from work, right? So when we say look at competitors within your market, I think companies are getting really smart also about just putting it out there, right? So if you look at competitors and their job descriptions, you don't have to look very far. They're really putting it out there to say, hey, not only does this job description tell you this is what you're going to do, this is the responsibilities, here's what I'm going to get from you, but instead it also says, here's what you're going to get from us, and here's all the benefits that are going to come along with being an employee. And so if you are unsure about what your employee value proposition is or how it really ranks with competitors in your area, we would just encourage you to start there and start looking at job descriptions and job postings for other similar workplaces in your area. Did you want to touch on the safe work environment? Oh, go ahead, Dave.
I'd like to remind everybody too that you have the chat and you have the question and answer is to ask any questions or throw out any questions. You don't have to wait till the end to ask questions. We're here to interact with you as well. Go ahead,
yes,
Brenda.
Thanks, Dave. Dave is taking a look and tracking those questions for us. Awesome. Did you want to touch on the safety work environment, Olga?
Yeah, and just to touch briefly on this, I think given a lot of the COVID challenges that we faced over the last 2 years, companies have really taken a look at how do you ensure that you provide an environment where employees feel like it's okay to come to work, they're safe, and everything within the company's control has been implemented to keep them that way, right? Whether it be social distancing where it makes sense, having a really great COVID protocol in case someone has been exposed, making sure you have PPE available for the team, and as well as sanitizing stations, that sort of thing. I think that despite, improvements and changes we have seen with COVID, I think this is one of those things that will continue to continue to be an expectation going forward in the future. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, inherently within a warehouse, safety has always been important, right? Because the functions that you're doing can be very physical in labor, there's equipment involved. And so safety has always been at the forefront of it. But I think COVID has highlighted that even more so. And so if you don't have a really good idea of what those safety protocols are, make sure that you revisit them and that you're able to clearly explain to potential hires or current employees what you're doing to ensure you're keeping them safe.
All right. So from a growth and development perspective, career progression training opportunities, skill development, all have always been important to our employees and in a warehouse. And they've always felt like, understanding what lies ahead outside of the job that I'm doing today goes a long way in keeping them and motivating them. And so I think that continues to be true today. So companies are really starting to evaluate what more can we do beyond these and how do we get creative around these areas to ensure that we're keeping our leaders and our employees really engaged. An example from a career progression is, making sure that you have a clear and transparent process around what does it take to get to the next level, to move into a more technical role, to move into a support sort of clerical role. Is that clearly articulated and understood by everyone in the organization? This is one where if you lack a clear and consistent process, it can really end up hurting you, and it can end up disengaging employees because they feel trapped and they don't know what the next step is and how to get there. We've seen organizations put all kinds of structures, some very formal, some very informal. Some have, decided we are going to invest in promoting internal talent to the point where process will be incredibly structured in terms of how we identify and select high potentials and how we pair them up with mentors, other leaders in the organization that can give them insights and prepare them, and really invest in saying, hey, how do you look at staffing, through the eyes of a leader, and give them opportunities to participate in different discussions. So really, it's up to you in terms of, how much depth and how much structure do you want to put around something of that size. The other things that we have seen that also are sort of mutually beneficial for both the employee and the organization is backup roles training. And so we have seen, and I have personally worked in a company where we would identify employees that we saw with the potential to do more, and we would have them formally apply for a backup process, whether it be a clerical position. And when there was vacation coverage, we would have them step in and conduct that role. And this really trained them and ensured that they were competitive in the event there was a full-time opening. And so when that happened, we had a pipeline of talent sort of ready. So again, this really kind of helps you look at different things that you can do. And then from a career growth perspective, you will have, and we have seen employees that have said, hey, the warehouse job, what I'm doing today is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm pursuing a degree in the medical field or, whatever else may be. I think that is a great opportunity for leaders and the organization to say, we're going to rally around you and support you and provide you even interview training to help you be successful, because we see you again and we think about you from a well-being perspective, not just for what you contribute to the workplace here, but how do we help you in the long run. That really kind of helps build that reputation and quite honestly that word of mouth referral about great companies that you work for. Those are sometimes the stories that you hear from employees. Brenda,
absolutely. And I think I would say, in that situation too, and in my experience, those then tend to be turn into your top performers, right? So even though they may not necessarily be with you for the long run, that they're going to be with you for another 2 or 3 years, because that's how long it's going to take them to finish that degree. And if they feel that level of support, then they're going to have that same level of engagement, right? And you're going to get that, and you're going to reap the benefits, not only from the performance of that employee, but again, just the engagement of the overall team, because they see that great performance from that one employee.
And this could relate to tools as well, right? Things like adding voice or adding conveyors to help improve their performance, but also giving them more investment into the tools and more of a pride in utilizing those tools to do better and to work harder.
Absolutely.
All right, I think we can, just to finish off here with rewards, I think like I mentioned at the beginning, financial incentives have always existed and have been a lever that, are easy to pull, in the sense of executing, not necessarily financially, but these continue to be important to understand. How do you pay for performance? How are your incentives really structured to drive, whether it be throughput, quality, safety, and really motivate and encourage employees to meet those objectives. Schedule differentials, right? We've seen, especially in today's world, it's difficult to staff your weekend shifts. It's incredibly difficult to staff night shifts for many reasons. So continuing to ensure that those are targeted in a way that will help you get that talent in the door. And then, attendance. So an example that, we've seen recently, it's an organization that was also struggling with lots of tardiness and just no shows, really absences. And so the company decided that they would pay their employees $20 for every day that they showed up on time. And then at the end of the week, if they were there the entire week on time, would incentivize them with another additional $100. And so again, these are just examples of things, whether it be like, hey, this is a temporary incentive because we need to get through a very peak season, very specific, critical volume, and we're willing to invest more to make sure we have that talent here. where those type of decisions can be made and tactics can be used.
Yeah, and I think I would say with this one sort of caution that we would say, and a mistake that we have seen some companies make is, with this focus and just attracting talent, right? Everybody's focused on let's hire the people that we need to hire in order to have them on board. And so they've come up with great creative ways to give, sign-on bonuses, right? Referral bonuses, etc. I would just say, as you put those financial incentives in place, make sure that you're not only looking at, oh, great, let me focus on the attracting the talent, but that you're also thinking, how is this going to impact my current employees? And so meaning you don't want to start incentivizing the new hires too much to the point that your current employees feel like, well, how are you incentivizing me? You're spending additional money getting new hires in the door, but what's in it for me? So just something to keep in mind as you put new financial incentives to attract talent.
Olga, Brenda, we see that the rewards was not the first one on the list. Is that because we're seeing that money is not always the highest reward for people? There's other things besides money that are important to them?
Absolutely. So I think, there is a shift, I think, in the market today. And I think it is a lot more than just the financial, right? And I think one of it is they have a lot of different choices right now, right? So they can go to a different company, and employees are actually looking at that value proposition, and they're looking at their total package. So they're not just looking at, oh, great, you're going to pay me $21.50 an hour. If I work 40 hours, this is how much I'm taking home. Instead, they're really looking at, what is your total benefits package? Okay, so great, you're going to pay me $21.50, but as an example, you're not going to offer benefits until I'm 60 days enrolled, right? Well, for them, that might be a big deal, right? Especially in today's market with COVID, they may have another employee that's going to pay them 50 cents less, maybe 20, but they're going to get benefits on day one, right? And so that employee is probably going to take that into consideration. And we're seeing that they're making decisions based on total impact and not just, again, that financial gain.
Yep. No, that's a great call out, David. Oh, go ahead, Brenda.
No, I was going to say, if you want to move to perks and recognition.
Yes, just to kind of finish this one off, I think this just continues to highlight the importance of some of the more traditional, ways in which we celebrated that we find that are still very engaging and important to employees. All building celebrations, giving employees the opportunity to bring their families into the building and to spend time, in non-work hours, engaging with leadership, giving their families the opportunity to let their kids see what they do every day. We have found those to continue to be really important and engaging for them, as well as, celebrating employee milestones, making sure that those closest to the employee are very in tune to those anniversaries, birthdays, and really important things that are happening, the birth of their first child, they're buying a new house. I think that the personable, the really sort of detailed connections that, there's really no easy way to achieve other than through really strong, engaging leaders that are connected to their teams. And then company discounts, obviously, making sure that, through those discounts, you are allowing employees to feel that value and that extra perk that they get because they are, part of the organization.
Thank you. So we've talked a little bit about just how do you identify that top talent, how do you ensure that you're taking care of them by providing the right benefits package and employee value proposition, how are you rewarding and potentially recognizing them. Then we have to think about how do we then really build them into a gold medal team, right? We all know that you can have, 10 different great performers, but if they don't really well work together, then you might not get the benefit that you really could get out of those employees if you don't have a cohesive team environment. And so when it comes to building a gold medal team, first and foremost comes to the right placement, right? So ensuring that you really have a very good long and short-term staffing plan. So do you really understand how many employees is it going to take in order for your organization to be successful this week, this month, this year, right? Understanding that is really going to allow you to then look at your employee base and figure out what are their knowledge, what are their skill sets, and what impact are they going to have on my total performance so that you can find the perfect placement for them, right? There's individuals that might be a great performer, meaning they're the most productive, they do great quality work, you really can just, tell them what needs to get done and they'll accomplish it. However, they may not be the best lead, right? They may need the best person to really engage and encourage others to do the same, right? And vice versa, you might have somebody that maybe isn't necessarily your top performer, right? They may have some bad days and be a little inconsistent, but you know that they are fully engaged and that they are the first person that greets the new employee as soon as they walk through the door. They are the first person to help them if they see that they're struggling or to correct any kind of quality mistakes. And so you have to really think about who do you want to place in those type of like key roles, whether they be leadership roles or specialty roles, to really have the best impact for the organization, right? So find the right placement first. How many people do you need? Where do you need them? And ensure that you're really evaluating all of that. And then nextly is really cultivating a team environment, right? So we don't want just a lot of team play or A players out there, but not necessarily a team. In order for you to get the most out of those individuals, you want to be intentional about designing team functions, right? What does that mean? Well, it kind of depends on your environment. So there are situations or functions where you might be able to create a 3 or a 4 person team, right? As an example, we see that a lot in our receiving functions. When they're unloading a truck, you might have, one person on an RC on a forklift, another person building pallets, someone else, receiving the freight, but they're working together as a team, meaning all of the units they process are really divided amongst 3 of them, and the performance is the same for all of them, right? This really kind of helps cultivate like them working together, them really understanding and communicating, and them wanting to be successful together versus just worrying about the units that they're going to process at an individual level. However, you may not be able to do that, right? So if you, for example, picking functions, this tends to be a little bit trickier because they're really just on equipment on their own, or they're really walking and getting that freight on their own. You can still create a team environment by ensuring that you're setting clear objectives to drive team results, right? Meaning, hey, team, today we have to process X amount of things. We really want to see everyone do X, right? And then really coming back and celebrating that teamwork and celebrating what you guys accomplished together versus really just focusing on recognizing the individuals, right? What you highlight and what you recognize on your team will set the example and will really kind of set the expectation for everyone else. So celebrate that teamwork, not just the result. I will tell you that there's times where the result isn't necessarily there and you missed the mark, but your team had a very challenging night. They dealt with technology issues. Maybe their equipment wasn't working properly. They had a lot of obstacles and they still did the best that they could. Make sure that you come back and you really celebrate that teamwork, right? That's going to go a long way for them to feel supported and for them to feel connected and feel like they're part of a cohesive team and not just there to move a box, right? And then lastly, another way to really, build that team camaraderie is by facilitating mentorship relationships. And the mentorship is different, right? So when we see our clients do this really well, is they really know and differentiate the difference between a trainer and a mentor. So a trainer is someone that's really going to teach them the technical aspects of the job, right? This is the screen that you go to. This is how you log in. This is how you receive. But a mentor instead is someone that's really going to welcome them, that's going to show them the company culture, that's going to ensure that like they know where the break room is, that they sit down and have lunch with them on day one, right? That they introduce them to everyone else, right? And really that mentorship goes a long way when you think about retaining talent because individuals now feel like they're part of a team, right? They don't feel like, great, I came in on day one, I know how to do my job, but now I don't know where to go for break, or I feel like the outsider, right? Because I just started and everyone is very connected. So we've seen a lot of success with companies that have kind of started mentorship relationships as well. Awesome. All right, Dave, do you want to pull up a poll before we wrap up? I'm curious to see, or if you could show us the results, that would be great. Awesome. So let's see. It looks like, which of these tactics have you found to be most effective in retaining warehouse talent? So 20% of you said financial, 40% said career development, promotion opportunities, tuition reimbursement. The other 20% is recognition, and then 20% is flexibility. It doesn't surprise me. I think what I will say with the career development and opportunities, another shift that we're seeing in the market now, and I will say that this is not really tied to supply chain. I think this crosses all industries. Is gone are the days where employees used to come in and say, I'm going to retire here and I'm going to spend 30 or 40 years in the same company, right? I think we now know that employees are really looking for those different experiences, and they see value in that. They see value in learning another company, another job, another culture. And so when they go into an organization where they feel like they can really add to their skill set, then they see it as a resume builder, then they tend to stay there longer, right? Because then they feel like, well, I'm adding skills every single day or every year, versus I come in and if I stay here 5 years, when I leave, I'm really only going to have the same set of skills that I had when I walked through the door, right? Olga, would you add anything else? Yeah, or Dave? Awesome.
No, I think
you guys.
Well said.
Yeah, I think you covered it well.
Thank you guys for responding. Again, nothing that definitely surprises us, but I think the other thing is, as you looked at it, right, there was maybe a leader, so maybe the career and development opportunities was the 40%, but the other three were not far behind. So I think that's the challenge in today's labor market as well too. I think Olga said it, there is no silver bullet, there is no blanket approach. It really comes down to you being very in tune with your employees, your market, your company. What you are asking of your employees to really figure out what's going to motivate them to stay, right? And how are they going to feel the most valued? So to summarize things and wrap up before we get into any potential questions, we talked about, how do you identify and reward and retain talent? And then once you have that great talent in your building, how do you cultivate that team culture, that team environment that's really going to get you to total success at the organizational level, right? But really what it comes down to is consistently following and leveraging these techniques throughout the year. So I will tell you that, it's not that great, check the box, we hired great talent, great, I'm rewarding the team environment, and now I'm moving on, I have a great team. As we all know, our teams are ever evolving. And so this is something that you just have to challenge yourself to be consistent about and to really keep it at the forefront to ensure that as you go through the year, you continue to build a stronger and stronger team, right? It's not something that you just set and forget. It's going to take a little bit more work than that. All right. All right, Dave, if we have any questions out there, and if not, we will wrap things up.
Well, the first question I got was basically the growth path that you're talking about does not always have to go through management. It can be a growth path in just knowledge base. It can be a growth path in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be just saying, hey, become a manager, become a supervisor, become a manager, go through that process. It's the growth path can be technical. It can be knowledge based. It can have a lot of different flows to it, correct?
Correct. And I think the one of the things that's really driving that as well too. So when we think about growth and career progression, I think there's a shift as to how people are thinking about it today, right? I think before maybe they were thinking about, I have to get the right level of education and then I have to get that title in order to get the job that I want. In today's market, it's becoming a much more skills only approach, meaning, there was an article that was recently published that said, companies were requiring a degree for 67% of the jobs. And we've actually seen a decrease now to, I believe it's 63% of the jobs. And so there's actually a lot of companies out there that are taking the degree requirement off of their jobs descriptions or their hiring, because they're really looking at, I just care about you having the skill. Can you do the job? I don't really necessarily care whether you learned it at college or you learned it at a previous employer or you taught yourself through YouTube videos nowadays, right? So there's definitely just more value on the skill itself and not necessarily on how you got that. And so I think that's why when employees look at a company that's really going to give them different skill sets, they tend to be more motivated by that because they know that it's going to make them a better employee, right? It's going to allow them future opportunities with other employees without necessarily being tied to a title. Hopefully that answered the question. Olga, is there anything you would add to that?
No, I think you answered it well. I absolutely agree. It's about looking at opportunities broadly and being able transparently providing those and explaining that to your employees too. So some that may not be thinking that way start shaping their point of view that way as well.
Perfect. A lot of this comes back to having a plan, right? Correct. It's not something that you can do off the cuff. You've got to have some sort of a plan for this ahead of time so that you're giving them a direction. Is that right?
Absolutely. And I think that's where the employee value proposition comes in play, right? I think it's all inclusive. Like, what is my plan to, one, be the employer of choice, to two, retain the talent that I have, to three, cultivate a team culture where people want to be a part of it, right? And I will say that, one, you have to create that employee value proposition, but two, you have to make sure that all leaders are aligned and aware of that proposition across the organization, right? I think there's a lot of power in that because if you at the higher levels, at the executive levels, are really aware of that, but it's not trickling down to the organization, then you're kind of missing the mark, right? So it has to be planful for sure.
Exactly. And it has to have a follow through too. You can't just say it's coming and never have it come.
Exactly.
There's got to be a follow through. Those were the questions we had. So
Awesome.
we thank you for all your time. You did a great job.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Really appreciate everyone's time today.
Thanks, everybody.